The Challenge's hot streak continues as the franchise recap its season 22 Battle of the Exes. Airing January to April 2012, 26 cast members were off to the Dominican Republic, then some to Iceland for 10 episodes, a reunion, and two specials, supposedly, with the winner of Couples Therapy once again getting their claim to 300,000 plus prizes. The theme itself was an evolution in similar fashion to Rivals before it, an incredible conceit for a reality TV show that only a long-running show with long-running cast members could pull off. We'd get the true sequel to this season a few seasons later, followed by the blending of Rivals and Exes on Vendettas and Final Reckoning, and even honestly in seasons after that. While this felt like the natural next step after Rivals, it does feel to me like Exes has an extra layer of risk to it with the male-female dynamic, what it still was in a challenge house. I wasn't that worried about rival partners, two guys, two ladies being at each other's throats. I was a little more worried this time around if we were rooting for Exes partners to get super pissed at each other, again, giving the gender politics of the challenge house where they still kind of were at this point in the show's history. The only other minor but significant evolution is that we were damn close to getting a true hall brawl here with this season's elimination game Hall Pass, which essentially was the T-bone elimination from Rivals turned one-on-one, and with some, instead of dirt cut out of the ground, it was bales of hay that you had to run back and forth between. It was guaranteed impact. And similar to the original, the first ever Balls in game being a continuous version of that game that we never saw again, this was basically continuous Hall Brawl over and over that we never saw this version again. We eventually next season will get the true Hall Brawl. From a casting perspective, this season was always going to be about one couple and one couple only, CT and DM. We will talk about them in just one moment. Let's first hit a few other people out of respect for them in the storylines that played out underneath the overarching CTDM one that dominated. Mark and Robin were back for one last rodeo, which was super fun. And this is probably the first season that felt like we could almost even put this back in Evolutions, but this was the first time we felt like we had OGs returning to the game, like after time away, like, oh my gosh, I can't believe they're here. They would come do this again. It was the first time we really had that experience. They performed well, ultimately losing the final elimination to eventual champs Johnny and Camilla. Having these two around, though, was just a really great balance that I feel like this house needed. Then we also had fellow OGs Anissa and Rachel providing the one same-sex pair of the season, which, while great to get the representation into a format that otherwise dictates either all straight couples or all gay couples if we had enough of them, it was a little clunky at times, kind of making the dailies and limbs work, fitting in the kind of what the rules would be for their team versus the other teams. Then there was Abram and Kara, whose romance on Cutthroat was one of the main stories of that season, but who were clearly entering a not so good place at this point and didn't provide a ton of positive to the season. Two rookie teams were here. One didn't matter and would never be seen again. The other was Dustin and Heather, who I thought were fantastic and were both going to be so good for the show, but they were taken out early thanks to a knee injury for Dustin. Two teams then were here that were partnering for the second time, which I guess probably should have been in Evolutions. That also, I missed a bunch here. It seems like that being partners for the second time was the first time that had ever happened, not the last. But Wes and Mandy and Sarah and Vinny were reprising their Fresh Meat 2 teams after having slept together while teammates previously. They'd both have short runs here, though. Wes and Mandy eliminated early, but not until after Vinny could have his moment of being a real piece of dirt when he pulled Mandy's top off in public and got himself and Sarah sent home. Okay. Back to CT and DM. The reason they did this season, not CT and DM, the reason production did this season very much had to be, I'm sure, we can put CT and DM on a team in the house together and see what happens. It's going to be great. And it was great. They were the dominant storyline that elevated this season to its highest highs. We'd obviously had their love story on The Duel, making that one of the greatest seasons ever. They had fallen out, broken up. We'd seen CT in a pretty bad place on Duel 2, especially, obviously. But he'd bounced back, grown up, and was a whole new person on Rivals the season prior. And now they were in a house and partnered up, and no one knew how that would go. But it went great. There was a trepidation. There was some ups and downs. There were some moments of trust and distrust, especially early on. A lot of heart to hearts, and importantly for the game going on, a good amount of butt kicking by the end of it, and doing really, really well together. The relationship portion is honestly as interesting and good of like human interest, real world-esque stuff the show had in a long time. And them competing together was fascinating. And we were all rooting for them. Make no mistakes. In the moment, the entire fandom was all in on DM and CT, not only working out as a couple, if that's what they wanted, but winning this season. Thanks to DM's relationship in the house, they had a shot to win the season, mainly her actually being close with Bananas. It kept them safe during some early season struggles, and then they kicked it into high gear late season, winning the final 2 dailies to avoid elimination for the entire season. They didn't see a single elimination. They walked into the final. That second to last daily was important. Race to the altar. It's one of the most iconic of all time. A series of checkpoints, all related to a wedding. We got to see these two put on the suit and dress, eat some cake, kind of eat some cake, share a kiss. And while all may have been, a totally silly, over the top daily challenge, it felt like something really special was occurring, at least for the two of them and for us watching them cross that finish line first, winning that daily. It was just really, really awesome. They'd head to Iceland with Bananas and Camilla and Ty and Emily, where they'd ultimately come up just short with Bananas and Camilla, passing them on that final climb up the last peak of the mountain. It was a tough defeat, but it gave us some great final moments with these two. A lot of references back to how strong they can make each other, how they can get through anything together. It was touching. And if they had won, if CT could have just gotten up and moved a bit faster up that slope, that elevation always takes out the biggest guys in the house, that oxygen level. It always wrecks you, as we would see for the first time really here, and we'd start to see in a bunch of seasons after this. But if he just could have gotten up there, if they would have won, it would have been an all-time moment at the top of that mountain. Instead, Bananas had beaten CT once again. He'd won back-to-back partner seasons and was now a 4-time champion, joining Darrell in that holiest of positions. Other memorable moments include the very unfortunate blackface incident with Camilla and Emily impersonating their partners, up to and including Emily painting her face. Obviously, horrible, awful. Throw all the negative words you want at it. They all apply. Ty handles it incredibly well, and it does lead to some interesting heart-to-hearts between Ty and CT, and then Ty and Emily themselves, and is one of those interesting inflection points of, nowadays, I don't know that they would put this scene, this moment, if they would show it, if they would keep Emily and even Camilla maybe even in the house after this happens. But instead here we see it all happens. We see the fallout from it. We see the conversations happen. And I would like to think a lot of people watching grow a little bit or learn a little bit from this experience as well. So it's one of those interesting cases of like, should they show these things? Should they not? When unfortunately, if they do happen, how do you handle them? What to do about them in the TV setting? And this one, does at least lead to some interesting and important conversations that take place after the unfortunate, horrible incident takes place. Then there was a lot of positive, though, too, to quickly touch on. There was Leroy beating Wes in X Battle, aka Pole Wrestle, where Wes did his very memorable jump spins to try and gain an upper hand. The Camillinator was born this season, storming through the house, throwing chairs, threatening to kill Johnny and other people, I think, too, etc., etc. There was a sunscreen circle jerk because Bananas thought it was weird to apply sunscreen to one other guy unless you did it all the other guys at the same time. And then finally, there was a great version of trivia played this season. One of our first ever, like truly great, like you nailed it. Trivia is the best. Keep doing this over water every season after it. That version of trivia, that was great to see. Overall, the format is really great. Doesn't meet its entire potential. It relies on CTDM story a lot, which thankfully is an amazing one, but a couple episodes here and there are slower. It's great, but not near the couple seasons that came before it. We're going to put it in the lower half of the great tier, give it a B+ score. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on the upcoming Battle of the Eras season coverage. Tune in tomorrow for Battle of the Seasons 2.